The Vinyl Destination.
Hey guys, I'm Dean Rush.
I'm Mike Kenner.
I'm Johnny Brister.
And this is The Vinyl Destination. It's a brand new podcast where three friends get together, choose an album and discuss. This week, we've got the legendary 1976 album from the Eagles, Hotel California. So how are you guys doing?
Really good, man. Yeah, I've actually really enjoyed this album. I have to say, I mean, we're only on album 3 of doing this together, but I've probably enjoyed this the most. And it's an album I've known for a long time from my mum, but I'd have to say I've just absolutely loved it.
Yeah, me too. You can't get more iconic than this album.
Yeah, it's really. I knew I liked it. It was a bit like, last week when we did Songs About Jane, and I was like, oh, I really like this album, and then I got to doing it, and I was like, I actually don't like it as much as I thought. This is one of those albums where I've gone, oh yeah, I like this album, and I've just suddenly gone, I like it so much more than I ever realised.
There's not a weak song on there.
Nope.
Every song is brilliant. Every song's brilliant, and it covers a lot of ground. There's a lot of different styles in there. It's just a masterpiece of an album.
It's like a warm hug. It's genuinely like a warm hug listening to this album. And Johnny, I said to you, didn't I? I was like, it just transports you to like Highway 1, driving down with the roof off, Pacific coast, the Pacific on your right or your left, whatever. And this is the album to listen to because they just captured that sound that just completely perfectly. I mean,
yeah, I actually I agree with the whole journey thing, and I'll kind of get to. I made some notes of like. Often what I do is when I listen to an album a few times, and then with this, of the morning when we do this, normally I sort of listen over and make a few notes of what kind of stand out for me. But it really took me on a journey, and it's kind of the epitome of like the 70s in LA, right? That's what it represents, and for me, and I feel that, and that's with the artwork, and that was and with everything. It was just it was brilliant. Should we start with some? Did anybody get some interesting facts at all? Here's the obvious basic facts that we would bring to every album. It was released in 1976 in December. It was their 5th studio album, recorded between March and October in 76. And it was the first album with Joe Walsh.
yeah.
And it was the last album with the bassist Randy Meisner. Do you pronounce it?
That's right, yeah.
It's their best-selling album, and it was 26 times platinum. And I know, right? I couldn't believe it. And there's over 32 million copies sold worldwide.
I mean, the stats speak for themselves, don't they? I mean, that is just. It was something like 30 something in the Rolling Stone best albums of all time. Or was that right?
Also, I didn't really look into facts of that, but if you look at I think they didn't start doing albums until it was either 70 or 71. And you think by 76 to have their 5th album, that's quick.
They also had their greatest hits album as well, didn't they? 71 to 75, I think it is, which was the best-selling album. Well, the greatest hits, it says, was the best-selling album until Thriller. And I think it's actually overtaken again now. I don't think Thriller's the best-selling album of all time anymore. It's
really?
back. It's this greatest hits again has topped it off again.
Greatest Hits is a funny one, isn't it? Because
it's not an album, is it? It's a collaboration, but not a collaboration, a bloody compilation. Sorry, it's a compilation.
Yeah, I sometimes feel it's a bit of it's almost like 2 different categories, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah.
When you think about an album as a period of time with a selection of musicians, I don't actually know I'm sure I know a lot of the songs on the Greatest Hits, but I don't own the Greatest Hits. But I bet it's banger after banger because they just have so many great songs.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though the fact that it was 71 to 75, and obviously this album's 76, so they're missing out all the bangers on this one, but it doesn't really matter because this is, as we said, is a standalone, one of the greatest albums of all time. There's no disputing that, is there? Really, you know?
Yeah. Well, you say about the greatest hits. That I imagine on there you've got like "Take It Easy," "Desperado," like these like huge hits.
One of These Nights, take it to the limit.
It's just so good. But to think they did that, and like I said, really quickly, and then there was like some changes in the personnel, and then they write this. It's does anybody know previous to this album? Because obviously, Don Henley does most of the lead vocals on this album.
Yeah.
Was that always the case before this album?
No, I think that, I mean, they shared, I think Don Henley obviously was the guy that I think sang most of the record, most of the lead. But I mean, you had four lead singers in that band.
Which is why their harmonies are so good.
Incredible.
Yeah. Their harmonies is actually one of my favourite things about the Eagles, actually.
Yeah, of course, man.
But also the fact you have like two, I'm sure all three of them, but you've obviously got three guitarists, right? But they're kind of, the switching of solos is a lot between Don Felder and Joe Walsh, but then obviously Glenn Frey solos as well. And it's amazing that you have a band that doesn't have one lead singer, doesn't have one lead guitarist. It really is a band of like absolute geniuses.
Well, it's kind of harking back to what we said about when we were talking in the first podcast about how unfair it was that Genesis had so many amazing musicians in one band. Mm-hmm. You can say the same about this, just multi-talented dudes that, you know, like Joe Walsh, obviously this was his first album and he sings lead on Pretty Maids All in a Row on this, I believe. It's like, not only is the guy coming in and ripping it on guitar, they're like, mate, sing a song. It's just mad, isn't it, to think that level.
And he plays piano on that as well.
Yeah.
That's him on piano. Yeah. And that was something else that really impressed me. Like Joe Walsh plays piano, and then Joe Walsh or Don Henley are playing synthesizers. You got Glenn Frey playing piano on another track. You're like, oh wow, they're all just phenomenal musicians. And I haven't really followed, apart from Don Henley. I know a bit more Don Henley's solo career, and obviously he's got some amazing material, but I don't know about the others. So maybe you guys could fill me in a little bit more with their solo stuff.
I mean, it's funny we're talking about this band again. It's another singer drummer. It's another drummer that sings lead, same as the Phil Collins, the same as Phil Collins.
I think he is the Phil Collins.
The Phil Collins. Yeah, it's Don Henley's voice as well. It's just
so good, isn't it?
Love it. I absolutely
so
love
good.
It. And also, what a musical drummer! And you think it's hard enough playing drums and singing, or playing any instrument singing, but I think drums is very particularly difficult while singing, your coordination going on. But it also dictates the time and the feel, and I think it's actually really amazing when you have a singing drummer as good as Don Henley, because his choices on drums are so musical, and how he locks in with different players. I really love his drumming. Like, it's a no frills kind of a unique thing as well, though. He's got his own sound, and that speaks volumes as well, doesn't it?
We talked so much about how as a player, just being recognisable, having your own signature kind of sound, and how important that is. And you can definitely get that from the Eagles. You can hear the players in that music.
Well, I mean, let's just talk, right? Probably greatest album opener of all time. I mean, having Hotel California, the song, open an album, it doesn't really get any better than that, does it?
Oh, it's so iconic. And it's like over 6 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And I think it was their first single in February 1977.
Yeah.
To release a single of like that long, but also that iconic and huge of a song.
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine that coming out, and imagine hearing it on the radio and being like, what is this? It's so good.
I'm incredibly jealous because I was talking to my mum earlier, and she would have been 16 at the time.
She ain't that old, mate. She must have been younger than that, I'm sure.
And she said she remembers it, you know, but like just it was like the end of the year, wasn't it? Was it like December time they released it?
December, yeah. I do know that 76 is, for me anyway, even before looking at this, 76 has always been a big year for me for music. Not that I was alive at the time, but 76, I like so many things went on in 76. Punk began really in 76. Yeah, your first punk rock albums were coming out 76. I know the Ramones did one 75, their first record, but most of punk kind of started to explode 76, 77. So you had like the Damned album, the first sort of British punk album came out in 1976. You also had Songs in the Key of Life on the other side of the spectrum. That was 76. And I believe Fleetwood Mac, Rumours, was that 76 or 77?
I got Rumours was 77. It was released in February 77, but it was recorded in 76, is what I
Yeah,
read.
you're right, probably 77, yeah.
I heard that the 20th Grammys, which were, what year would that have been? Oh yeah, 78. It actually, Hotel California actually lost Album of the Year to Rumours.
Correct. So that's what confused me, that why would they in the same category of the year if they were released different years? Because I read the same thing somewhere.
Yeah,
I read something about, I know they won 2 Grammys. They won 2. They were nominated for 5. They probably would have been included in 77 because 76 Grammys would have already happened by the time the album came out, right?
True, and Rumours was out in February.
I know that the Eagles were actually invited to play at the Grammys that year, and they refused unless they knew that they were going to win Album of the Year.
Wow.
I think it was something like that. And so they even suggested, look, can we just be in a room secretly, and if we win it, then we'll perform. And they said no. So they actually they didn't bother going. They didn't even go to the Grammys that they won, and someone else collected it for them.
So they did. Yeah, they did. Wow. So it's almost arrogant, isn't it? Like there was a clip I went watching one of their live shows from 77 this week, and an offshoot.
I'm not too sure if it was arrogance. I think it was more that I think they were getting a lot of bad press at the time. I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's interesting, this offshoot that came on YouTube, and it was one of the big American TV shows a few years ago, and they have a live band and they wanted to play the Eagles, and the producer was like, no, you can't, it costs too much money, and they were like, can we not play like 3 lines of it? And there was like a hard no from the Eagles that like their songs don't get played, which is quite amazing, really, because in many ways that's also about, you know, it's free marketing, isn't it? It's free, but I guess they don't need it. Is the thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you mean the show wanted to use a portion of one of their songs? Is that what you mean?
They wanted to play. I can't remember why. It was just like I said, something that came up on YouTube. But they then worked out that after the break, it was something like if they wanted to play an Eagles song, it was going to cost them £250,000 just to play it. That was interesting. I mean, that's got no relevance to the album, but it's, you know, thinking of the whole Grammy thing.
Got to be pretty ballsy though to be up for like the best album award, the Album of the Year award, and not actually go to the ceremony. Because I mean, that's like the biggest award you can get, isn't it? And to like be a hot contender for it and just be like,
yeah. I read somewhere that they were rehearsing. They just rehearsed instead.
Wow. But I really like that belief they had in that album, though. Obviously, like I don't know if Cells had already represented that, but they obviously had a lot of belief in what they were doing as a band.
Well, I would be really intrigued to know at that time. Obviously, look, with hindsight now, you look at Hotel California and you look at Rumours, Fleetwood Mac, 2 incredibly influential and, you know, in making all the top 10 lists and all this of albums of all time. But I'd be really intrigued to know at that specific time what that was like the competition was like. You know, what if someone was like, was it like a clear front runner, is what I mean, or was it kind of like these two albums that were really enthralling?
Yeah. Well, I mean, imagine what that music scene was like in LA at that time of the 70s, with bands and albums like that coming out of there. Like,
nuts. In fact, a story from this album, they because they split the recording between LA and Miami, so some of it was done in LA, and some of it was done in Miami. And actually, I think it was when they were doing Miami, Black Sabbath was in the studio as well, when they were laying down part of the record at Miami, and they had to stop a few times because Black Sabbath was just too loud, and the music was coming through the wall, so they had to keep taking breaks. Like,
yeah,
I love. I mean, that was rock and roll. That was the music of the time. In fact, I'd say, can we all agree the 70s probably the best era for music?
I would say so.
Yeah, I'd probably go there. I think I really enjoy the 70s. Definitely a lot of my records I go back to are like that era, you know. Before we delve into maybe the individual songs, I actually got a real kick out of the artwork, and I guess it's something we nowadays, with things on your Spotify's or your MP3s, whatever, the artwork is probably less considered by consumers now, I imagine. And this one really stands out for me just because I think it's amazing. Obviously, I was very fortunate to get this from another one from my mum, but it's so beautifully shot, and so I picked up a little bit of information about that, and very rare, I guess. I mean, I often am drawn towards an album for artwork, but probably not as much as this one. And obviously, I remember it as a kid, so I think it gives me a lot of nice memories from that. But I got the front cover is a photograph of the Beverly Hills Hotel by a guy named David Alexander, and the art director was Kosh, and Kosh was a British guy, and he'd also done Abbey Road, 1969 album, and he'd also done The Who, 1971's Who's Next, and I found that quite interesting. He did that, and then they've got an amazing picture at the back of a hotel, not the hotel, the front cover, and then inside with all friends and the band members, and it's a really cool looking picture. And there's this really, I read some little reviews, and there's this shadow of another guy up in the top one of the top windows there. You can't tell who it is, and it was really great. It really stood out for me, actually. But apparently Henley wanted that slightly sinister edge. There was also a time where the hotel threatened legal action over the use of the image. I don't know if they ever went through with that. But yeah, I've written down here, the rear image was shot at the lobby of the Lido Hotel in Hollywood, and the gatefold image inside shows the same lobby, but filled with members of the band and their friends. And they wanted a collection of people from all walks of life.
So the front cover is not the same hotel as what the back cover and the inside sleeve show. Is that right?
Correct. From what I've read, yes. So you've got the picture
Why is that then?
I assume because I did read some of that. They'd taken a shot of a few hotels, and this was the one they liked the picture of the most.
Right.
Okay. And they'd actually taken this, because obviously they didn't ask for permission. They've just taken a picture of a hotel.
Yeah.
Why they've done a different hotel inside, I don't know. Maybe it was a better image. Maybe they were allowed to. I actually don't know the ins and outs, but I just really like the whole color scheme of it.
I really love the typeface as well that Hotel California's written in. It's kind of like
it's in that neon sign thing,
yeah.
Which was all their promo stuff as well. I read afterwards. And I just really like it. It represents the album in a way that I kind of heard the album. Like, it made me think of 70s LA, but that's exactly what the artwork is. And it's so iconic. You would see that in a shop, you'd be like, I know exactly what that album is.
And similarly, you hear that first 2 seconds of Hotel California, the opening track, and you're like, I know what this is. It's the instant recognition that, that is you don't get that, you get that only from the great albums, really, Well, I'm excited to hear the rate. That's the thing I'm most excited actually later on is everyone's ratings, because I think we can only unanimously agree on this one.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I was thinking that this week, I wonder what you boys are gonna rate it, because I almost knew straight away.
So this record was released in '76 in December, So you could argue really that 77 is the year for this album. You can't really include it in 76, can you?
Well, I guess you got your release date, but I guess with the promos the year after, isn't it? And you tour it like that thing I put in the WhatsApp group. That's a show from '77. So you're right. Yeah, I mean it is released '76, but I guess all the hard work goes into '77, right?
Yeah.
Of promoting it.
I could imagine that live video that you sent us is just amazing.
Yeah,
isn't it? Really, what a band! What a live band!
Yeah,
and probably one of the last ones from Randy Meisner as well.
Yeah, it must have been his last year.
Yeah, one of the founding members of the band. Did you know that they were all session? Obviously, they were all session players, and they all
I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, so they were playing. They'd done a few things. I know. I did a little bit of research into Randy Meisner and his past, and I know that he'd played in a couple of bands before, one of them being Poco, and a few others. But he also sessioned. He played for James Taylor, and things. But he played for Linda Ronstadt, and that actually where he worked with Don Henley, Glenn Frey, and Bernie Ledden, which were the founding members of the band. Right, so they were all part of Linda Ronstadt's backing band before they then formed the Eagles after. Wow. So he obviously they had some amazing. They did their albums, and this was the last one for him. It was obviously they were touring like crazy, and he was getting. I think he was getting ill. They were having. I know he had a fight. I think with Don Henley backstage at one of the gigs, because he sang "Take It to the Limit," which is one of their biggest records, and they used to always do it as an encore. And he started refusing to do it because it's got this super high note in it, and he was just really struggling to get it. So he started refusing to do it. It's an amazing song.
Yeah.
He started refusing to do it, and I think that was due to that he kind of decided to leave the band. I think it was due, like he puts it officially down to exhaustion. But I know that they were all kicking off, and I'm sure the touring life, to that. And as you said, there's a lot of albums happened in such a short space of time. It's enough to exhaust any band, that kind of working schedule, album tour, just non-stop,
Well, what you think about that is if you have, like you've got a band, I think I was watching this little clip about the Eagles, and this guy says, any band is on the verge of breakup, any rock band, because that's just what it was. But you have a rock band that has 5 frontmen, they're always on the verge of a breakup, because it's just, you've got so many powerful people there who are so amazing within their own right. You don't have one guy like you in a lot of bands. You have your front man or whatever. Like these are 5 guys who are their own front man within their own rights. But
yeah.
But collectively,
you could say the same. Actually, I know we keep coming back to Fleetwood Mac, but you could say the same thing there. Fleetwood Mac, every member of that band is right up there. And it's a band of lead singers. It's funny how so many of them sort of were around at the same time.
Yeah, the band hierarchy doesn't really exist in that sort of situation, does it? Everyone's kind of battling for their own little bit of the limelight, and it's
which is interesting because a lot of those. If you look at Fleetwood Mac at Rumours and you look at the Eagles at Hotel California, both those bands weren't the original lineups at that point. So you sometimes think that the original people often have more power. It's like if you move in to a friend's house, but it's been their house for X amount of years. It's kind of you're moving into their house,
Yeah.
I think it's amazing that we know we're talking about the Eagles at this period of time, but when you think about Fleetwood Mac, it was Mick Fleetwood and John McVie are the actual originals.
Yeah, well, Fleetwood Mac is Mick Fleetwood and John McVie, and that's where the name comes from, Fleetwood Mac.
But admittedly, I mean, not to delve too much into the rumours, but that band was like this band was phenomenal with that collection of people. That collective, at that period of time. Obviously, the Rumours was a very different thing going on behind closed doors, but this is just phenomenal songwriting with great guys. Obviously, what I found really interesting was the writing credits, and it was something I felt was an interesting discussion. Is that, like, for example, Hotel California was written by Don Felder, Don Henley, and Glenn Frey, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have to ask, though, and we all know what it's like to be in a band situation. I always wonder, if you've got 3 people who've written it, was there never a period of time that they're in a rehearsal room and they were just like chucking ideas out? Because things evolve. It's like a conversation, right? So I always find that interesting when you look at your the writing credits and it says 1, 2, 3 people. I wonder how those decisions come about. That we don't need to take it to that rehearsal room.
That is an interesting subject, because obviously intellectual property, you can't. There are certain times, I guess, when you can say, "This is mine. I did this," But unless you write the entire thing yourself, every piece of music goes through that creative process, and at some point, especially in a band, the songs grow, songs evolve and change. So even if you turn up with a song finished and written, if that and you're in a band, by the time it comes out, it's probably not the same song, or
my point is, like, why would there only be a credit for those 3? That's what I mean. Like, we'll probably never know that in those situations, but I find that thing interesting, because you're like, surely that, like, Joe Walsh must have added something, for example, but maybe not.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm sure there's a discussion involved in which they say, right, who's getting credit for this? Who's getting it? I know that Coldplay. I know Coldplay are one of those bands that they just split everything. No, maybe not Coldplay. Who am I talking about?
No, Coldplay do.
They are.
People. That's why Guy Berryman's worth £82 million. Genuinely, it is.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah, it is.
God.
Also, there's no surprise that band are still together and happy.
Yeah, that's right.
This is it.
They're happy,
This is it.
I mean, it's a huge point. It can be a huge point of contention, because, like what you said, Johnny, even though it's Joe Walsh is not listed as a writer, say he had, written a tiny 10-second guitar line or something that made that song, that's technically part of the songwriting team, So
well, think about that, specifically on Hotel California, but you could say it for most of the songs. That guitar solo at the end, which actually, if I'm right saying, you correct me if I'm wrong, but it's Don Felder and Joe Walsh, they both have a guitar solo.
Yeah, they're like swap, yeah.
But then when they harmonise with each other, like, you wonder how much input someone's going, well, hang on, let's try this, and it could be like the tiniest snippet, but it can really change something. Like that solo at the end is so iconic.
Of course, yeah. I could imagine it's a really grey area, isn't it? Because you could almost credit a song's success sometimes on a particular part that may not be credited as a writing part.
Yeah.
But the song wouldn't be the same without it.
Exactly.
So, and do you know what? I do agree with this Coldplay notion of sharing it equally. You're the band. That's the band.
Yeah. And it probably solves a lot of problems, in the long term. When someone's making 50 million more than you are. Like, if you actually worked out, I don't know what each individual's worth in the Eagles, but if you worked out solely on writing credits here, you've got some people who are going to be filthy rich and others that aren't.
Yeah. And you can also see, like last week we were talking about the dynamic change when you change a member of the band, or in a group of people, one person can change the entire dynamic of a conversation or a social situation. And there's so many stories, I think, if you look through time, a lot of bands changing one member and then breaking up very shortly afterwards, because the band's just not the same.
Yeah. Well, I heard an interesting thing about when Joe Walsh joined. Apparently, Don Henley, there was concerns about him fitting in, because Don Henley said he was too wild, in quotes, wild. I mean, what does he mean by that? I mean, he obviously knew him personally. Does he mean as a player or as a person in the strip joints and whatever? Who knows?
I think probably a person. There were a lot of drugs flying around at that time.
I think it might have been. It was Life in the Fast Lane. He was with his drug dealer.
That's right. He actually said that he said Life in the Fast Lane, didn't he? The drug dealer.
The drug dealer said, yeah.
During the drive.
Yeah.
They were going about 90 mile an hour, I think it was.
I heard that he with the riff on that on Life in the Fast Lane. I think he used to like warm up with it, Joe Walsh, like, and then it turned into a song with like Henley and Glenn Fry's input.
Yeah, Don Henley was like, "What's that? We're making that into a song." That's what I read somewhere as well.
That's wicked, isn't it? That's super cool.
That's great. You can definitely hear his influence on the record. I know that it definitely it's definitely got more rock and roll in this record. They definitely moved a little bit away from their country rock kind of vibe, and it just has a bit more diversity on this album. And you can definitely hear Joe Walsh.
Are they from the West Coast? Are they from LA? Are they from California?
I think Don Henley's from like Detroit or something.
I think it's mainly Midwest, isn't it?
Yeah. Let me.
Something I wasn't sure about.
I think only one of the members of the band was from California.
Right. It was just interesting with that southern rock vibe, and then when I googled it, it said California, but I don't know how recent that information is because they probably live there now. You know?
Yeah. Sorry, my mistake. It's actually Glenn Fry who was from Detroit, and Don Henley was from Texas. He's from Texas. So.
Right, that would explain maybe a lot of the southern rock, but it's brilliant. Do you know what I really like during Hotel California? The song going through is that kind of reggae ska, get, and it goes through the whole song.
Yeah.
And I
think the song was originally going to be called Mexican Reggae.
Was it really?
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the sort of work in progress name for it was Mexican Reggae.
You know, at the start, Mike, you know that, and it goes. Is that on the bass?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was. I just wasn't sure, but I really love that the bass player's got like melody, isn't it? And it's like on the bass and the tones wicked on it. That really stood up for me.
Well, Randy Meisner was that guy. He his bass lines are always very melodic. You can hear this in like One of These Nights, which is just probably my favourite Eagles tune, actually. Which is not on this album, but it's just got such a cool bass intro.
Yeah, I also really like, we talk about big drum intros. We've obviously done Face Value, and we did the Phil Collins, and we talked about other drummers now. I really love when the drums come in, it goes, doo, doo. Everyone just knows it. I mean, it's so simple, but so iconic again. And then the song really kicks in. I really love that about this song. And then it comes into this it's just an incredible song.
Do you mean when he goes gung gung boom like the two tom hits? Is that what you mean? Like, yeah.
And I love his toms, and he's got the roto toms in there, and the way he uses them. Like, obviously it's very musical, but it's just, again, it's so iconic. And it's funny because if that song ever comes up and maybe you're playing a band or you're jamming it, you've never got roto toms with you. Chances are you've got a one up, one down situation. You're like, how do I recreate this when everybody? It's one of those things, it doesn't matter if you're a musician or not, or if you're a drummer or not. Like, everyone knows the sound of those rhythms going round, and I really like that about his playing, and particularly on this song, actually.
In terms of that's actually one of the things that is not my favorite thing about the album, but it's one of the things that I always notice is that drum sound. I absolutely, it's just so, it's there, isn't it? It's like you're sat next to the kit. It's so like, it's not like roomy at all. It's just wicked. Like, it's just so, the snare sound is just so boom, that's it. There's no like big old reverb. It's just there, and it just sounds so great. It's part of the character, isn't it?
I think he played Ludwig drums, which are, especially back, like, they're so known for their 60s and 70s kits, and from looking at I don't know about studio, I assume so, but from looking at the live show, he didn't have any bottom heads either, and he didn't have a front bass drum skin, and that all kind of adds to the sound, in those, and those fuddy drums, they just sound brilliant.
Yeah, I naturally noticed watching the live video that the bottom heads were off.
Yeah,
and you can hear it. It's totally different sound.
Yeah, well, same as Phil Collins. I know we keep mentioning him, but he had his bottom heads off as well. And it was obviously a thing of that time. And I very fortunately have a 60s Ludwig kit, which is my absolute baby. I love it, but I've never played it with the bottom heads off. Like it's a great sounding kit, whatever. But I would love to experiment and take the bottom heads off and get a very particular sound. You know?
So what actually does that do to the sound? Because now that you've said that this has got the bottom heads off, and I know what the toms sound like, but I wouldn't, if you were to like play it with the bottom head on and then take it off, what is the actual difference there? Is it not as resonant, or
might be able to describe this better than me? Yeah.
It rings more, you know. If you've got, because obviously I think the mics underneath, it's just you're playing straight into those mics. You haven't got, you know, there's
It
no
doesn't
way
bounce off. Yeah, it doesn't bounce off.
There's no containment of the air of the sound. So that's why it's got that kind of boom, like really sort of.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, the funny thing is, I've also got this 70s Rogers kit, and when I first got it, I set up in the studio with Ash, and we took the bottom heads off. But I'll be honest, it just sounded rubbish. And obviously, we couldn't work out why. It just sounded so bad. I mean, it's a completely different kit. You know, it's different woods and all that. But I'd like to hear it with the Ludwig. But yeah, when we did it, we were like, oh, this just sounds absolutely rubbish. Also, the room, it wasn't a great room.
But there could be an element to tuning as well. Obviously, you haven't got that bottom head on. I don't know about drums. I'm not an expert on this thing at all, but I definitely think you'd probably need to tune them quite differently to accommodate for not having that bottom.
You lose such a big element. I mean, we definitely mess around with tunings, but what became very apparent is that your sweet spot becomes much smaller. But again, with a lot of that fuddy sound, a lot of it is down to dampening as well. Like, he's got something on his snare, and he's got something on, you know, whether it's tape, whatever, on the toms. That also really affects it massively. But yeah, it definitely was a vibe back then to have your bottom head off. And I do like that kind of thing. You know, it's interesting. I'm sure it's the same with the other instruments. You know, how, you know, you talk about old 60s and 70s guitars. I don't know if that is a thing that changes over time. A lot of that was just the way they were made back then.
Man, the thing about the Eagles, as we've said earlier, is it's the construction of the parts and how they all fit together it's just a masterclass, isn't it? But I guess they're all incredible musicians themselves, but that's also a benefit of having three guitarists. They're obviously three very different. Like we said, Joe Walsh brings that rock edge. I mean, also look at Hotel California. You've got that distinctive 12-string going throughout, as well as, I mean, it's layered like a bunch, that tune, but yeah, it's three very different personalities coming to the table to create, you know, the sound.
It's interesting to note that the recording approach is, like you said, it was so layered up, Hotel California.
Yeah.
And then you listen to there's a sort of really rocky tune. I haven't got it written down.
Is it Victim of Love?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which was Victim of Love. Yeah, it was recorded live.
Really?
Yeah. Wow, so you have Hotel California, which was like loads of takes kind of spliced together. And then you've got Victim of Love, which was recorded live. And I think it's only the vocals that were kind of put on after.
Wow.
So
I did not know that.
Yeah, two massively different approaches.
Well, what always stands out about these albums, and I think it's very different now, and I think it probably comes a lot down to budget and the way people work. But this album, I think I've written down somewhere, was recorded between March and October. Like, how often now do guys get together and write an album for that long? Not necessarily write it, but record it for that long.
That's 8 months. Yeah, you could almost have a baby in that time. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Was it 8 months? I read somewhere that it was like it took 1.5 years to do.
Really?
You can have 2 babies in that time. Blimey.
I mean, maybe that was writing as well. I'm not sure. I mean, they might have been recording for that long. Whatever it is, it doesn't happen like that now.
No, it gets churned. It's churned out pretty quick. Well, not necessarily all the time, but it's definitely. I can't really think of an example where you could spend 18 months recording an album nowadays. I mean, or even 8 months. You know,
but I also think that's down to us, of like how we've been brought up in the music industry, and that I imagine you get bored doing an album for 18 months or 8 months, whatever, because we all like to do different things, and it's about being creative in that. Like, I just think it's probably how things are, and then kind of
I think there's so many different elements involved. Obviously, budgets for recording music aren't the same, and this is of a time where record labels would just chuck money and go and make a record, whereas now it's definitely not that way anymore. Album sales, aren't really don't seem to be the main source of income for a lot of music now.
No, it's merch, isn't it? Merch, live shows and merch is what they say.
Well, it's, everything has a huge effect on how things are made. Like, even down to artwork. If people aren't buying CDs and records like they used to, the artwork's just a necessity they do rather than it being a thing. And it's the same with, like, if you don't have that budget, you can't spend that much time in the studio, and it's just all these different things. You realise when you sort of break it down, that's why everything's so different now. And we talked about, I think maybe in the last episode, about how singles. We talked about Maroon 5 and how hearing Moves Like Jagger didn't make us want to hear the whole album. So it becomes about singles as opposed to having this whole body of work, which this is exactly that. It's a whole great album that any song, in my opinion, could be a single.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. There's so many good songs on this album.
Well, one thing I'm keen to talk about is just what we've already said about how diverse it is. I mean, it's got that. I love the genre name. Like that yacht rock sort of sound, that kind of soft 70s soft rock California coast vibe. With something like New Kid in Town, that's like proper yacht rock vibes. But then, like you said earlier, Victim of Love's a bit. It's got a bit of a glam rock feel to it, hasn't it?
Yeah, it almost does. Yeah.
And then you got the real, Western folkiness of, like, Hotel California. It's just a bit of everything. Like, it's so diverse. In 43 minutes of music, that's pretty crazy to get that, to be coherent with that.
One of my favourites, actually, which is very different again, is Wasted Time.
Yeah, Wasted Time. I think might be my favourite on this album.
It's up there. I think my favourite, I was trying to work it out because I know we always discuss that. I think my favourite might be Trying to Love Again.
Yeah.
I mean, I almost can't choose, but Wasted Time is amazing.
Do you know what? It is impossible to choose. I say Wasted Time only because obviously it stands out as a ballad, but really, you can't choose. I can't anyway. I'd really struggle if I had to choose my.
Isn't that a great problem to have?
I'd have to say Eagles are probably the best band for driving music, aren't they? If you think about if you went for a road trip, you're going to be listening to the Eagles.
That's what I said earlier, didn't I? I said, mate, down that Pacific, it takes you to the Pacific coast, this album. I'm telling you just see it in your head, and that's what it does to me.
Yeah, it's not quite the same on a rainy day on the M1, but it's but it helps, I guess.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah, no, Wasted Time is amazing, and what I really love about it is when I was listening to it, is the vinyl stops and you turn it over, and then you got the reprise of it, that incredible string arrangement.
Yeah, I love it.
And that string thing is like a minute 22 long, but it flows, but it really takes you through this very, very quick journey. But it's just amazing the way it was arranged like that, and to have that on this record again, like you've hit nail on the head. This album offers everything.
I think listeners of Norwegian death metal would probably.
I don't know. I think
argue that it didn't have everything.
I think they'd love it though.
I do. Something for everyone, man. They'll find something in there. I'm just trying to think my favourite tune. I find it really difficult. I'm a big Victim of Love fan, and I'm a big Victim of Love fan. I just love. It's just the head-banging groove. It's just so sweet.
Great slide guitar solo as well at the end with Joe Walsh.
Was it Victim of Love that Don Henley recorded vocal on?
He's lead vocal on that one.
Yeah, and I don't think he was originally supposed to be.
Really?
I think it was Don Felder.
Don Faddle was one of the writers on that one. It says also
That's
it was,
right.
John David Suver or Sufer, I don't know how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, so there's a story about this tune. I think it's I hope it's Victim of Love anyway. I wish I had more time to do some research on this one. But I think what happened, obviously, Tom Felder wrote the tune, or the majority of the tune, I think, most of the music. And I think he did it for a whole week. He was trying to record the vocals on this. And I think their manager took him for dinner one day while Don Henley went in and did the vocal for it.
Wow.
Oh.
I have to say, though, it really suits Don Henley's voice. Do you guys have a favourite vocalist, sort of lead vocalist?
What, in the Eagles?
Yeah, on this album in particular. Yeah.
I mean, it's Don Henley.
Yeah,
It's Don Henley, man.
Yeah, I mean, he's done 5 songs, hasn't he, the whole album? But
I think he's the one I think he's the singer his solo music. I think I prefer the most.
Yeah, me too.
As well.
I do have a soft spot though for Glenn Frey on New Kid in Town. I mean, that is.
Yeah.
But again, that's dependent on mood. You know, it's like, but his voice suits that song perfectly, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I think so. And obviously, my favourite song is actually Randy Meisner singing.
Yeah.
Try and Love Again. So it's interesting, but I would definitely go with Don Henley. For me, it's probably my favourite. But I really, really love that there isn't just one singer on this. I really love that. It's quite rare now, isn't it? Or any time really.
Yeah. Well, it is. Yeah, it really is. We talked about how, Genesis had so many great artists and Fleetwood Mac, and we really don't get bands like that anymore, where any one of maybe that's why these bands were so fantastic and why we still listen to their music now, is that every single member of this band is a solo artist in their own right.
Yeah.
And that's so strong. And it's the same with bands like Fleetwood Mac as well. And bands like the Beatles as well. Everyone in the band is of star quality, has their own, solo records and are solo artists in their own right. And that's what, that definitely contributes to why this record is just unstoppable. You can't say a bad thing about this record.
Yeah, I agree. I can, not that I was trying to find one, but I definitely couldn't find one.
Oh, the Eagles, really, musically, there's just, and same with, one of my favourite bands of all time is Fleetwood Mac, and I know we're talking about them a lot in this podcast, but it is the same there. Like, every single member of that band is top notch. Is a solo artist in their own right.
I have no doubt we will end up doing Rumours, and that would be a very, very interesting.
We definitely should. We should definitely do Songs in the Key of Life as well.
Absolutely.
Which came out 76.
Yeah.
What a time.
Yeah, I didn't do the research into 76 and what massive albums came out that year. Did you, any of you do it? Because I totally dropped the ball on this.
I think AC/DC put out High Voltage, which was their first album, didn't they, in the April? So yeah, there's a bunch, man. But it's just amazing to see how diverse that year was. Like, I'm just looking down the list now. There was Sparkle by Aretha Franklin. Obviously, a lot of the rock stuff like UFO, Rick Wakeman. And
REO Speedwagon was that year as well, I think.
Yeah. And then there's Hot on the Tracks by the Commodores. Like, it's just such a rich year. And like, I was totally not aware, Mike, what you said earlier, that punk technically started in that year. So there was another additional genre of music added to it.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what it was like. We sort of say a lot now, going, albums aren't like they used to be. And I think we're probably right in saying that. But I wonder what it was like having that much music come out and how exciting that was and how probably inspiring it was to hear these great records. I think I saw when I looked, there was an ELO record on there as well. And you just think about these endless amounts of great artists and bands. And it's just, that would have been amazing to kind of grow up with that.
But I would like, that's kind of what I was touching on earlier. I would like to know, is it the benefit of hindsight that's making us say this? Because obviously we know, and they are subjectively incredible albums. But at that time, I'd love to think, were people like, oh, this is going to be known in, 50 odd years time as still one of the best ever. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I think it has to be. I think it has to be. I mean, my parents' favourite records, favourite artists are probably the same as mine. And that's not to say amazing music hasn't happened in between, because it absolutely has. And there's probably a few that have come since this sort of era, especially, from each era, there's fantastic artists and musicians, but you can't, a music lover, you definitely cannot say that the Eagles were, and bands that came around in this time and the music that came around in this time isn't their favourite shit. It really is. It's right up there. Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder. I still listen to that a lot. And I'd say more so than music from now. Maybe that's because maybe that. I mean, it's all down to preference, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, I think obviously as musicians as well, we have a different viewpoint. Because we're obviously avid listeners and studiers of music, so we're going to have a different opinion than someone that isn't so into music, but I think these records we're still listening to now, it's got to say something about how good the quality was at that time.
Well, that and the sales, and I don't know if I always agree with sales, but I would have to definitely agree in this occasion. There's a reason it sold so many, and like we've said, I've stuck the album on a few times just to listen through, and just how enjoyable it is to have an album that every song had a purpose, had a meaning, and do you know what, one of the nicest things I find about this album, actually, I don't know if you agree, the last song on the album, The Last Resort, it feels like it's wanting me to wind down from the rest of the album. Like, it just feels like, or like you were saying, like maybe driving in the distance and you're kind of seeing that album before you. It's just something about that last song that when I get to it, it's so perfectly placed. Like, I'm not exhausted. I'm not thinking, that was a long album. I'm just going, wow, what an amazing album. And it's just winding me down in this. It's just so bizarre. I just really felt that every time I listened to it. It's
like a warm hug. That's what I said earlier, man. It's a warm, tender hug. It really is.
Yeah.
It evokes those sorts of feelings for sure. It's incredible.
And there was funny enough, in the album cover, there's for some reason I couldn't tell you why, but there's only the lyrics to Hotel California. So my mum was telling me, actually, when she got this, there was also a poster inside, which I did pull out, and I've misplaced it, but I was chatting to her about this album, and she was like, not the best looking guys ever, brilliant band. But I've misplaced the poster. But inside, so you've got this little bit with a sort of the album sleeve or whatever, and it says about the production and said who wrote what songs and who played what and the song titles. But then here, it's only got the lyrics to Hotel California, which I was just like, I mean, it's a very long song for starters, so there's only so much space. But I didn't know why they'd done that. But one of the lyrics that sort of really popped out at me, it's the last lyrics on it. It says, "You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave." And it, for me, that was a little bit of, is that sort of saying in that period of time, or that dirtiness, that kind of that hotel, because it was obviously known by a lot of the famous people. Once you've been there, you ain't ever leaving, kind of thing. Like, it had such a lasting effect, and whatever those lyrics mean, it just really stuck with me, and I have to say their lyrics are amazing. So again,
there's a lot of speculation to that song, isn't there? There's a lot of mystery as to what the song's about. Yeah, there's a lot of different opinions on what the song's about.
I love about songs when there's no like definitive answer. There's a lot of it can be interpretation, but it always says such amazing things about lyrics or a song when it's not as clear as day what that is.
Sounds a bit ominous as well, a bit Bates Motel vibes. You can check in, but you're not going to leave. You're not gonna like, you're not going to get out alive. Like,
Yeah.
You said they were going for a bit sinister thing, weren't they, with the front cover?
I'm pretty sure that there were claims that it had something to do with Satanism.
Really?
Like that. I think so. I skim read so much of this stuff.
I feel like that was quite a thing though back in the day, because even with the Beatles as well. I mean, they said if you listen backwards to a bunch of Beatles stuff, all the hidden messages and all this, so maybe that was a thing of the 60s and 70s.
People get so nuts, man. And I think LSD has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But the amount of stories, man, people get wild. Like fans get wild. Like the idea of Paul McCartney not being Paul McCartney, and it being an imposter.
I love that one.
It's so mad. Or Elvis didn't die.
We should do a podcast on the music industry conspiracy theories.
That's a good idea.
I mean, they'd be endless, I think.
Yeah.
Or we can make up our own, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Start a new one.
Maybe we start a podcast where we just make them up, up conspiracy theories.
Yeah, exactly.
See if we can get them some traction. That would be fun.
Yeah, exactly. See how far we can push it.
Tupac's been living with me in London, chipping in on my rent.
That's another one, isn't it? That Tupac faked his death. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
There's many.
There's loads of fake death stories, isn't it? Like, I think it's people, like fandom, people that just get so into something that they just can't accept.
Yeah, the Paul McCartney one really does tickle me though, because I've heard that the theory is the original Paul apparently died in a car accident in like 1960, like really early on, and like since then. There's been a fake Paul. And I said, well, the argument is, if it is fake Paul, right, then fake Paul is super talented, man. That dude's unbelievable. Like, the original Paul.
And he just happens to be a left-handed bass player that can sing and sounds just like Paul McCartney.
It looks exactly the same.
Yeah, it's so weird, isn't it?
No, it's not him.
Yeah.
Not him.
Oh, that's funny.
But why as well? Why would you need to believe that he wasn't the same Paul McCartney?
I wish I knew.
For what reason is it? Like, if he was to die, why would you need to cover up that he had died?
That's it. That's what I'm confused about. Say that Paul McCartney had died in a car accident, then why? Like what?
Yeah.
Why would they fake it? Why would they? It's just
because they had a better Paul on the sideline waiting.
He was driving the car, mate.
He's literally been warming up on the sidelines for years, waiting for his super sub. Ian Dowie jumps on. It's like that all over again.
Ian Dowie.
So I have to ask you guys, because I'm really intrigued. What's your rating?
All right, who wants to go first?
Bear in mind, let's just recap. What did you give Dion? What did you give Face Value and Songs About Jane?
I gave them 7 and 8 respectively. Face Value 7, Songs About Jane 8, which is controversial, I know.
Yeah, what did you give, Mike? Do you remember?
I can't remember, man. Pretty sure Face Value was 8. And
I think
Songs About Jane was 7.
Yeah, so I was then 8 and 6. What's your verdict, Dion?
Okay. I mean, it doesn't need to be said. I'm preaching to the choir here when I say, without question, one of the greatest albums of all time. It's got everything. It's got unbelievable vocals, unbelievable musicianship, unbelievable songwriting, unbelievable lyrics. It basically goes on. It's a perfect album, I think. And for a perfect album, what more can you give it than 10 out of 10?
There he is.
I couldn't sit here and say this album is perfect and not give it 10 out of 10. So Hotel California gets a 10 from me.
Great, Mike.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't think you get more iconic than this record. I don't think you top this record. I think it's when it comes to a body of work and an album, it ticks every single box for me. I've got to give it a 10 out of 10. It's got to be.
Oh, we're going in strong.
Hey.
So for me, everything from the artwork is impeccable, which I wouldn't say I'm a particularly arty guy, but it's really, really done it for me. I think it's got, as we've said before, that every song is amazing. I love the harmonies. I love all the musicians and their musicality, and their ability to write collectively together like that. It's a 10 out of 10 from me.
Whoa!
30 out of 30 for Hotel California. I mean, is anyone surprised? I'm not surprised. I mean, come on.
I'm not.
No.
I'm not at all.
No.
3 10s out of 10.
Yeah.
We won't get that again.
We won't
That's
get
a
that.
30 out of a possible 30.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I wonder how many of those there are out there.
There's only one album. Well, if Phil Mitchell did, if he did a covers album, that would have to be a 10. But before hearing it, it's a 10.
Well, there we go. That concludes our assessment of Hotel California. 3 unanimous 10 out of 10s. As always, thank you so much for joining. This has been The Vinyl Destination. Please do let us know by email if you've got any album suggestions. Otherwise, see you next time. See you later, guys.
Cheerio.
Cheers.